Dr. Mason West.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Bare Bones. As always, I am Dr. Mason West, doctor of physical therapy, and also avid Bears fan, here to talk about this upcoming game. You get me solo today. Little scheduling quirk. Danny can't make it, and so I'll just be taking the reins today. Couple things just to go over. I've gotten some questions. Yes, we're still going to be doing preview shows and all that. When when the Bears make the playoffs, we're going to have a couple of guests still to finish out the year, and then something a little special for y'all for the playoff as well. So keep an eye on that. So still Thursdays, nothing's changing there. There's really no reason. Also coming up with Christmas, there will not be one on Christmas, but I might try to pump one out Christmas morning if I have some time before I head off to do some holiday festivities. But there wouldn't be anything Thursday just because how Christmas Eve is going to work and all that jazz. So just a couple of tidbits there. But we are here not to talk about that. That's in a couple of weeks. We're here to talk about the Bears-Browns game as the Browns come to Soldier Field. So we're going to go into our chart review. These is going to be where we're going to just go over some quotes, some things from the week that popped up that I found interesting that maybe you'll find interesting as well. First one up, this is after after the Packers game. Ben Johnson said this: "We will be a playoff team once we earn enough wins to become a playoff team. Right now, we are a 9-win team. I don't think 9 wins is going to get you in this year. So we have to do what we can to get enough wins to find a way to get into the tournament." So, I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? 9 wins is not going to do it. But I think that mentality of one game at a time at this point, like who you are a 9-win team. And you're not going to be – that's just is what it is, right? And even, let's be real, 10 wins in this NFC is a good chance not getting you in, even with the expanded playoff format. And there's even a situation that if you get to 11 wins, you still may not get in. And that one's more specific. If the Bears and the Lions both end up at 11 wins and the Bears don't beat the Lions in Week 18 as part of that 11, they wouldn't get in that situation either. So it's 1 week at a time, and nothing is given to you in this league. It's all earned. The Bears had an opportunity to earn one step closer, and they were not unable to do that last week against the Packers. So I love that mentality from Ben Johnson, and I think that you see that mentality throughout this team. Just Kevin Byard said some similar things, Caleb as well this week, and so as long as that's echoed through the locker room, I think you're still in good hands mentality wise. Speaking of Kevin Byard and how many wins it will take to make the playoffs, we're going to have to get at least 2 wins to get in the playoffs, 3 or 4 to win the division. So I like that because it does highlight, I mean, it's something maybe necessarily new, but I think sometimes it's good to bring it up. The fact that players are paying attention, right? And they care. They're not just sitting there. They say the week by week thing, and because that's who's in front of you, then that's very true. But they know what it's going to take to make the playoffs. They know what it would take to win the division. They know what it would take to get home field advantage. And, that also shows that they care, right? And so I love that. Caleb Williams on what he likes working with Ben Johnson. Our open communication, I think it's just the bond we are building. The details this offense takes is going to take a little more than a year to get on his level. So there's a couple things in there. I think the biggest thing for me is the layered and almost like unsaid respect there, right? That's going to take more than a year to get on his level. So obviously it's Ben Johnson's offense. He should have a wrangle on it. But, Caleb essentially saying, I don't have all the answers and I need more time and more time specifically with Ben to get those answers. He respects his mind as a coach. And I think, going into the year, there were some people questioning on, where Caleb was at mentally. Would he be able to take hard coaching? Did he want to be coached? All this. And he does. You see that. You see that on a weekly basis. And you see that in the comments he makes. You see that with his body language. You see that with the way he handles things with teammates. And actually, the next line, that's also from Caleb, is on how he felt he handled the Packers game ending the way that it did. I feel great. It goes to the MJ quote. He missed how many game winners? You move on from it. I think 9 times out of 10, I'll hit. And so far this year, Mr. Fourth Quarter, Iceman, he's come up clutch in the fourth quarter. We've seen time and time again how many times he's been able to lead a fourth quarter comeback. Now, obviously, you wish you didn't need that. That you didn't need that last drive to try to put it away. That the offense had started hotter, right? You spotted the Packers a 14-3 lead there, and honestly, you arguably outplayed them in the second half, but it was a tough hill to climb up. So that mentality of one, that he believes in himself, that he can overcome and really win in those moments, but then also you can't dwell on it, right? If you bring the negativity or anything that was from last week into this week, it's going to affect your ability against the Browns. And at the end of the day, the Browns are the most important opponent. They're the ones next on the schedule. You again, trying to get to those 11 wins, this has to be one that you win as a part of that. That's pretty funny. Ron Winarski 2915, Jay Cutler to the Bears. Pretty funny considering Philip Rivers coming out of retirement, age 44, to try to keep the Colts' hopes alive. Considering Jay Cutler relatively recently got arrested for DUI and how his career ended, even if the Bears were in a precarious situation where Caleb was not available, Jay would not be my first call, if we're being completely honest. All right, next one. Training room roundup. We're going to take a peek at the Bears and Browns injury reports. And just to not bury the lead, by the way, the Browns injury report is wild. We'll dive into that, but it's a whole thing. So for the Bears, Kyler Gordon, DNPs the last 2 days. I'm going to be honest, I don't expect him to play again this season unless there's some really deep playoff run. Soft tissue issues. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know that I consistently talk about them being one of the more complicated things to deal with. At least like a broken bone, the timeline on that. It's 6 to 8 weeks for bone to heal and all that jazz. Soft tissue, it's reactive. You could have a strain and it could take you a week to get back. You could have a strain and it's a 3-month process. It just depends on the individual and a multitude of other factors. When you layer in the fact that, and groin's another whole conversation compared to like a quad strain, quad's much easier to deal with. Groin, just because of how close it is in terms of how it deals with the pelvic floor and just core stability, things of that nature. The Bears themselves, right? They had firsthand dealing with this with the Jalen Johnson injury from over the summer and how long and what ended up happening there, right? He came back arguably too fast, had a contralateral issue, which required surgery. They're not trying to have the same thing happen with Kyler Gordon, especially with his general history of soft tissue issues. So when you wrap all of that up, I don't think they're going to throw him. Then someone asked, well, why is he on IR yet? Well, because they're not sure. Once you put him on IR, now it's a 4-week conversation. Now you for sure, right, cannot have him for those 4 weeks. Unless you're ready to basically say, hey, Rochelle, and he was already on it too for this year. So there's so many factors that go into it in terms of why he wouldn't be on it right now. But I would not be surprised if we don't see Kyler Gordon again in 2025. Travis Homer, not sure where that popped up from. DNP with the ankle, must have been something from the game, but it's not exactly special teams. That's the only thing he's really contributing right now. Rome Odunze, limited participant. Having Rome back would be big. You missed him the most last week in some of those gotta have it third down situations and the longer right when it was 2nd and 15s. Rome's the one running the dig from the backside normally, and who he was early in the year was the first read on a lot of progressions, and you had a trouble moving the ball in that first half. The Bears had to get more creative in the second half. It was a lot more play action. They broke out the diamond formation to help with protections, things of that nature. So, having Rome back is definitely going to be helpful. Someone reached out and asked, well, if he's a limited participant, does that mean that the stress fracture was overblown? No. He still has a stress fracture. It's not healed. The difference, really what they're at this point is, So a stress fracture and a fracture, traditional fracture, are different. Stress fracture is right, essentially a line in the bone that is still technically a break, but there's not enough separation to be a true fracture. But it's still painful. Vibration still bothers it. Pressure still bothers it. Taking on load still bothers it. Versus a traditional fracture, right? There's actually like potential shifting and movement of that bone. Um, it's not. It's again. It's not healed. He's playing through it. It's painful. That's why he needed the week off. So you take the week off, you let inflammation go down, you try to do some stability work around it, just have the muscles do a little extra work around there. And I will say there's always a chance that the fracture could get worse. Like it could become a full blown fracture. So the hope is that, right, those conversations are happening behind the scenes between Rome and the people close to him, the training staff, the coaches, and the GM, that this is something that Rome's comfortable with, that he can produce. And it's not a surprise that, you saw relatively closely when his production dipped a bit, was also right around when he started to kind of be on the injury report. It hurts to run on a stress fracture. So it's not surprising that he's not able to run as fast, produce as much force, jump as high, and then football's a game of inches. If that's happening, now all of a sudden that catch where you had 6 inches of space, you now have 4 inches of space, and that could be the difference between a completion or not. On any given route, the difference on being able to cut at 100% versus being able to cut at 40%, that's the difference between multiple, a foot of separation. So at this point in time, Rome is, I would expect him to play. Is he on a snap count just because they're trying to manage that foot still, things of that nature? There's a good chance of that, but it'll be good to have him back. Tyreek Stevenson, limited participant. Of the two, I would think Tyreek is less likely to play than Rome. I believe he has a hip flexor strain, from what I understand. But so we'll ultimately see what happens on Friday. Because if it is a hip flexor strain, as I've heard, then ultimately you're just trying to protect that. You don't want an exacerbation of it. Hip flexor, it's honestly over talked about in terms of how tight hip flexors get. I could get on a whole tirade about that, but we're not going to do that here. Really though, the strength of the hip flexor, just so important to, especially think about a defensive back where, you're backpedaling, having to drive your foot into the ground and make a break on the ball. So we'll keep an eye on that. Zacchaeus, I don't know much on that one, to be honest, but I wouldn't worry about it. It seemed like he finished up pretty well in that game. I would think this is kind of more similar to in the past where the Bears have just kind of handled people's early week a bit more gingerly, and then they're ready to go for the game. Ruben Hippolyte is back. Take that for what you will. I think, Jackson's done a pretty good job. So I don't think Ruben's going to be starting anytime soon. I think Jackson would continue to start there in that place. Okay, so just browsing 8482. I hold these. I'm starring your questions. We're in we'll get to the specifics of the matchup later in the show. That'll be coming more in the second half. So just put a pin in that. And then Jalen Johnson was full. Jalen's going to be, he's playing still on a snap count, keep increasing that. You're also going to get into the point where you have some, I don't know if problem is the right word, but I mean, you have some interesting things to think about here so Jalen, you're trying to increase the snap count. Nashawn Wright's been playing well, right? He's been creating a lot of turnovers, a lot of splash plays. That being said, he does allow a lot of yards. He's been allowing a lot of touchdowns. So you do have to keep that in mind. But then you're going to try and bring Tyreek back. So how do you manage that, right? Is Nashawn more of the closer to 100% corner, and Jalen Johnson and Tyreek rotate since they're still the ones on the injury report? Is it just playing a hot hand? What is this ultimately going to look like? I don't really know, honestly, what that's going to look like. I would think that, just like I just said there, Tyreek and Jalen would be the ones that are more rotating. One, just because of how Wright's been playing, but two, because they're the ones that are more banged up. But as hopefully they get healthier, you're going to have figure out how you're managing that. And because yes, you have Kyler Gordon now, but none of them are nickels. They don't play that way. So, and you have CJ Gardner Johnson as your nickel at this point. Obviously, he can move back to safety or rotate, but so you have a lot of moving pieces here. It'll just be interesting to see ultimately how that's managed. All right. Luckily, the Bears one was relatively short. The Browns is insane. I'm not reading all these names. It's nuts. But just in general, so the ones that you need to know: Cleveland Browns put Ethan Pochek, their starting center, and Jerome Ford, both on IR. In addition, the team signed center Darian Dalcourt, defensive tackle Keith Cooper to their practice squad and released a couple of guys. Doesn't really matter. Just some other notes. Former Bears second-round pick Tevin Jenkins made his first start of the season for the Browns last week at right guard. Honestly, as Bears fans know, Jenkins is pretty much always hurt in some capacity. So he popped up on the injury report today. He was limited with a shoulder injury. So they're down their starting center. Joel Bitonio, who their starting guard with a knee and a back, didn't participate the last 2 days. Jack Conklin, their tackle, concussion the last 2 days. I'm sticking mainly with the big names here. Mason Graham, DNPs the last 2 days. One of their starting defensive tackles for the rib injury. Shelby Harris came back in, so he looks like he was eliminated. Excuse me. He popped up in the injury report today. He's a very good defensive tackle for the Browns. Don't worry about you. Dylan Sampson, one of their rookie running backs, so he actually was taken along with Quinshon Judkins. He didn't participate the last 2 days with calf and hand. David Njoku, their starting tight end, didn't participate the last 2 days with a knee. Carson Schwessinger, I expect him to play, but he was limited the last 2 days with ankle. Wyatt Teller, a guard, didn't participate the last 2 days. Cedric Tillman, concussion and rib, didn't participate the last 2 days. Denzel Ward, one of their starting corners, didn't participate the last 2 days with a calf. And then, Zach Zinter, another guard, popped up in the injury report today, limited participant. And that's just like the main names. There's a bunch of guys on this list. So I haven't followed the Browns enough to know, like, is this just something that they do? You're right. Do they just have a lot of guys just kind of not participating and they play on game day? But it is interesting because with all those names, I mean, the Browns are basically just down to Weipler, and now Jenkins is Weipler as their starting guys. You would have Robinson, Lucas, and Levison outside. If this holds, the Browns are down bad, especially on that O-line. And so that'll actually connect to a point that I'm going to have later in the show regarding the Bears and hopefully and maybe getting a pass rush going. But that's all we're going to do for the injury stuff. Let's keep an eye on what's going on, because if all of a sudden, if a bunch of those guys for the Browns pop up as fulls or even limiteds on Friday, it's a very different story. But as things sit right now, there's going to be a lot of weight on the shoulders of Shedeur Sanders, Weipler, and Quinshon Judkins, as those are like the main guys who are currently healthy for the Browns and that offense. Oh, and then also you could throw why am I blanking on his name right now? Their other rookie tight end, Harold Fannin. Geez, Harold Fannin, actually, who I loved in the draft coming out. He would also potentially have a big day if Njoku can't go. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back. Kombucha is a premium focus. Geez, I can't talk today. Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Made from organic teas and infused with natural electrolytes, kombucha offers a delicious and effective solution to maintain peak performance. Better athletic performance, increased nutrient absorption, improved wellness, and improved cognitive stamina. Use code BEARGUTCHECK for 15% off your order. That's BEAR GUTCHECK. If I had my kombucha before the podcast, I wouldn't have flubbed that ad read. Okay. So first category of some of the more specific parts of this game. Oh, my thing small. Ooh, that's a cool view. I didn't know I could do that. I don't want it like that, though. There we go. Okay. Is our knee jerk reaction. This is just a hot take going into this next week. So I agree that there are reasons to have optimism, but I need to see progress from Caleb in the accuracy department. There have been games with bad drops, games in the elements, games with throwaways after, some amazing escapability. But even with some of those throwaways, they're coming off of a misread, bad timing, things of that nature. But all that stuff is true, right? There have also been plenty of why was that so off? Like, was it tips kind of passes? Why didn't you get to the dig route on the backside? And just passes where you say, I don't understand how that pass, what happened with that pass. There, and a lot of that's been happening with Caleb too. So, for example, first drive on the quick out to Burton in that Packers game. I personally I think quick outs are silly. They're way too complicated throws for not a lot of oomph. But that throw needs to be more accurate, or go to DJ on the stop route because DJ was open there too. Check down to Manungai in that game, down at his feet. There's multiple examples, not just last week, but throughout this season. Per next gen stats, Caleb is second worst in completion percentage, only ahead of JJ McCarthy. He's eighth highest expected completion percentage. The offense is working and the receivers are getting open, and last in completion percentage above expectation at -8. Right, so the offense is working. The receivers are open. There's open throws to be made, but he's throwing 8% less than what you would expect him to in terms of completion percentage, which that is a problem. Williams also has the worst off-target throw rate in the league at 15.3%. So that's subjective, of course, but with that stat, 15% of his throws are off target. This is not me saying he can't get better. He is still over processing right now, and not in a mental issue way, but I mean, it's a complicated offense and it's a new offense, right? And there's a lot going on. There's a lot of the pre-snap motions, the landmarks, all this stuff, all that's valid. But so there's still the mental side that's going to keep improving, and he has the innate athleticism to improve. Like you saw that with the Josh Allens of the world, the Lamar Jacksons, where they came out, there was some accuracy issues, but over the years, I think just because of how athletic and the muscular capacity that these players had, that accuracy improved. So essentially, what I am saying is we would be in denial if we didn't admit that it needs to be better if the Bears are going to be real contenders week to week, year to year, right? So I just think that's important to highlight. And I don't know if the 10 degree feels like 15 is going to be where the offense takes off, but we'll see in terms of the passing game. To be perfectly honest, something brutally honest, you should worry about this Browns defense. Obviously, you start with Myles Garrett. He's only 2.5 sacks away from tying the sack record of 22.5 held by Michael Strahan. But there are other really good players in this defense, and their DC, Jim Schwartz, is an excellent defensive mind. So you need to watch out for guys like Alex Wright at edge, Shelby Harris and Mason Graham in the interior. They both are on the injury report, so we'll see what happens there. Tyson Campbell is solid at corner. Grant Delpit, he's getting healthier. He was on the injury report, but is trending in the right direction at safety. I mean, that's not even talking about their linebackers. Devin Bush has been excellent this year, and I already talked about Carson Schwessinger. I expect him to play. He's been a menace. I was concerned. I liked him coming out in the draft. I was a little concerned that he might have issues in coverage, but that hasn't been the case. And actually, per Kevin Fishbane, the Browns have 8 players with 6+ tackles for loss, led by Myles Garrett's league-leading 31. For context, the Bears only have 1 player with more than 4 tackles for loss. Montez Sweat is 12. So this team flies around, they tackle incredibly well, and they gang tackle. The Browns defense ranks 3rd in the NFL in defensive EPA in 2025, with an EPA per play allowed of -0.1125. The Browns also have the number 1 ranked rushing defense in the NFL in terms of success rate allowed in 2025. The defense stopped 68.68% of opponents' rushing attempts successfully. Their defense ranks 12th in passing success rate. And so really what you're looking at is they're strong where the Bears offense is strong in terms of the run game. And they're kind of average where the Bears offense is average in terms of the pass game. It's really going to be the, unstoppable force, immovable object when it comes to the run game. And then, in theory, a place where you might want to take advantage of them, which is in the pass game. The Bears have had their struggles. This isn't news. They crush it in terms of explosive plays, but it's the consistency, the down-to-down passing that's been an issue. So, especially again in a game where it's going to be cold as heck, where catching the ball is tougher. Is that something? Do the Bears stick with the ground game, which they had to do last week? They really had to get the ground game going again to get back in the game with the Packers. Are you going to be able to do that against this particular Browns defense, which is very good? Well, ain't this humorous? Something just a little quirky or funny. Caleb Williams is the bottom of the league in aggressive throw percent with 10.7%. So I find this a little funny because you can take this two ways, and just depending on what narrative you're trying to spin depends on which way you're going to go. So you can go one way and say Ben Johnson schemes up and emphasizes open throws. He said this. You go back to when he said we don't do 50-50 balls. So you could say the offense works, right? Ben Johnson with his scheme and some of the players with their ability create open passes. So Caleb doesn't have to throw into tight windows. Now, we also know that there are issues with the completion percentage. I just did a whole thing on that. So you could also go the route of saying Caleb could be more aggressive at times when the windows are tighter. A positive example of that would be the Olamide Zaccheaus touchdown. I mean, that was a tight, super tight window, but he put it where it needed to be. And there's a couple of times on film where you can see that Caleb, doesn't necessarily rip the ball to the smaller window. He goes through the progression to second, third, and all of a sudden he's scrambling or he's throwing the ball away. So, I think there's probably a middle ground you'd like to live in where, yes, you have those beautifully schemed open throws that do exist in this offense, but sometimes you just gotta rip it, right? You gotta trust your arm. You gotta trust your skill set. All right. We have a new sponsor for the podcast, not just this podcast, but Second City Gridiron in general, Rula. And we're very excited to have Rula as a new sponsor. As someone who works with athletes every day, I can tell you this. You train your body with intention. Your mind deserves the same level of care. I've personally used therapy in the past, and it helped me handle stress, stay focused, and show up better for the people who rely on me. And that's why I'm a fan of Rula. It takes all the friction out of getting started. No long wait lists, no guessing who's actually a good fit. You answer a few questions, and Rula connects you with a licensed therapist who matches your needs. They work with most major insurance plans, and the average session copay is just $15. Look, a lot of guys wait until things hit a breaking point, but therapy isn't weakness, it's a tool. The same way you'd work with a physical therapist to fix your squat pattern, knee pain, back pain, any of that. A therapist helps you tighten up the mental side so you can keep performing at your best. If you've ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or like you're carrying more weight than you've let on, Rula makes it simple to take the first step. Thousands of guys have already used Rula to finally get the care they needed. Don't keep putting it off. Go to rula.com/gridiron and get started today. That's RULA.com/gridiron. Take the first step, get connected, and take control of your mental health. All right. So next up, we have our what you need to know. And you know what? This is where I'm going to go back to some of those comments. Specifically, just browsing 8482 had a couple of comments, questions. So I'm going to go through those two that he had. If the Bears focus properly for this, I'm going to put this on the screen. What? If the Bears focus properly for this game against the Browns, then all good. The Browns are the one team I've been worried about all season. Packers are irrelevant here. Interesting. I'm going to go on to the second comment. Who do you think will win, Bears or Browns? Give that in recent year, Browns have been better in these games. So I think I'll go to the second part first. The NFL is a year-to-year league, right? It's a week-to-week league when you really think about it, but even more so. I mean, think about where the Vikings were last year and where they are this year. Think about where the Commanders were last year and where they are this year. Think about where the Eagles were last year and where they are this year. Think about where the Chiefs were last year and where they are this year. So I don't, and I think that always pops up too, actually, to go back to the Packers part of it. Whenever you have some of the beat writers and they're asking Luther Burden, what do you think about, the Bears-Packers rivalry? Like, the dude just got here. He was at Missouri before that. And I don't know where he grew up and went to high school. He has no thoughts on the Bears-Packers rivalry. So he doesn't have, this thing in the back of his head of, man, the Bears, what the Bears record has been in the last 5-10 years and the overall arching thought process there. So I connected that to the Browns. Given in recent years, the Browns may have been better in these games. Caleb Williams has no thought process on Justin Fields just getting absolutely destroyed a couple years ago in that game when he got his first official start. Colson Loveland has no ties to that. Joe Thuney, who's a vested veteran. I mean, he comes from the Patriots and then the Chiefs. He knows winning. So I don't like to look at, it's just interesting in general sometimes to be like, what have the matchups been between two certain teams? But that's not really how the players operate. That's not how the coaches operate. So even if the Browns have been better in these recent games, the last couple of years, that's irrelevant. I mean, even more so, Shedeur Sanders is starting for the Browns, right? That's what's relevant. And then to go back, then the previous comments about how he's been worried about the Browns game all season. I haven't been. I mean, I can go back to the schedule. When it first came out, I marked the Browns as a win, and that's again because yes, their defense is fantastic. I read off all the stats. That part you should be concerned about. I just don't. And yes, and the Bears defense has been average to below average, depending on not just the game but the quarter. But with how this Browns offense is constructed, I mean, and I'm about to talk about this a little bit later with some specifics, but he played well last week. I give him credit, and I've said this in the drafts process. I said this all year. Shedeur Sanders should not have been drafted where he was. It was too late. I mean, the whole talk of him being a first round pick was too much, and I think the league showed you that. But where he ended up was too late. That was ridiculous. He should have been starting over Dylan Gabriel when they opted to trade Joe Flacco. But all that being said, he's still a rookie and he's still below average. He is. He had a great week last week, but 1 week I'm not flipping about. Quinshon Judkins is a very good running back, but that offensive line is a problem. I can't remember the exact stat. I wasn't able to find it again, but the Browns running backs are getting contacted way too far into the backfield, right? So and that's going to mute their run game. They don't have a dude at receiver. They're down a couple guys. Jerry Jeudy's okay. So just with all that being said, the defense is fantastic. The offense is very okay to not, if any, or below average. So, I'm going to get to my official pick later, but I think you can almost see where I'm heading with this. But to talk more about Shedeur, so far I love it, hate it, rehabilitate it. Something I love about the matchup, something I hate, and something I would rehabilitate. I love playing Shedeur. This isn't meant as shade either. Shedeur is a solid rookie quarterback and should have had the nod before Dylan Gabriel. Pretty accurate with okay arm talent, but he plays well on time, right? So actually that works well for the Kevin Stefanski system, playing on time. He gives his wide receivers chances downfield. You saw that last week, and that's why he was able to produce like he did last week. But he is a rookie and has some major limitations. I mean, he plays like a guy that is more athletic than he is, which gets him in trouble, right? There was one play where he was kind of shifting around the pocket and he ran 5 yards forward and then dirted the ball. It was just really weird. I think he realized the window to get away was not even what it was at Colorado. He's learning that week by week that he just isn't that athletic of a guy. He needs to speed up his processing and how he's seeing the game. He does play well on time, but when that picture is changing, he's a little slow out of it. Shedeur Sanders against the blitz this year. He's 9 for 23 for 165 yards. His adjusted completion percentage is dead last at 44.4%. His PFF passing grade is third to last at 40.1. His turnover-worthy play percent is 11.1. 11% of the time it is a turnover-worthy play. That is insanely high. His EPA per dropback is negative 0.25, which is 30th in the league. He's pressured on 84.6% of his dropbacks versus blitz. Part of that's the offensive line issue. There's a pretty obvious game plan here, right? You're going to pressure the dude. And, it's kind of the problem is the Bears have not been able to create great pressure, but clearly there are some quarterbacks. So Jordan Love is a good example last week. He's very good at replacing the blitz with the ball. So if the blitz comes off from a cornerback on the right side, he's very good at, all right, I got to put the ball right behind that player, right? Because that's where the hole is going to be. Shedeur is not at that level. He just isn't. Blitz comes, he doesn't do well with it. So this is an opportunity, right, to play an offense and a quarterback specifically that even though the Bears can't create a lot of pressure pass rush normally, to do so. Hate. It's the obvious one. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. I hate the matchup of Myles Garrett and Ozzie Trapillo, especially when you combine that with a sack record narrative. you're going to really have to get creative assisting Ozzy, but you really need to maximize the effectiveness. So the last week, for example, when the Bears are trying to contain Micah Parsons, first of all, they didn't always go specifically with Micah. They would do something where like you would have Cole Kmet on the right looking to chip, but he's chipping the wrong dude. Micah's lined up over the left guard. And so, there needs to be a check in there where Micah's identified, hey, he's over the middle. We're going to shift Cole Kmet into the backfield. And so now Cole Kmet can go help him there. That's not what you're doing with Myles Garrett. He's lining up at the edge. He's just going to attack you. So some of your chips and stuff should be more relevant, but you also have to make a decision. That's another problem that comes up a little bit with this offense is your chip guy an outlet, or is he truly helping pass protection? Because sometimes it's both, and that can't happen, right? Because if you're chipping on Myles Garrett, but pressure comes in from the right, Caleb needs somewhere to go up the ball. So that flat route off from Cole Kmet, for example, is not going to be there fast enough. And, so there are too many tight end chips that are whiffs. That happens too. Colson Loveland, I think it was 2 weeks ago, had an example where he just went to go chip and he just missed, and because he was so worried about going out in his route. So again, that goes back to my point of what is your emphasis? Is it the chip or is it the route? I think there was another example. Cole actually chipped Parsons last week, but because Parsons was stunning inside, Cole actually knocked Parsons off of Ozzy's block and into the stun. So you just have to be conscientious with your decisions, and every choice you make matters. I still don't like Swift as a pass blocker. I mean, he's a bad combination of slow to get out as the check down, but also doesn't really stay in and stick his nose in as for pass rush. He'll throw his body at the rusher versus more of a legit block attempt, and that can make it tough. So when you mix all that together, I am concerned about what Myles Garrett can do. Right. Rehabilitate. I'm just going to continue this. You see the trends. Bears pass rush. This is specific for this matchup. There is not much the Bears can do this season to improve their pass rush outside of manufactured pressure and a pass rusher or two going on a heater, which I doubt happens. You saw this last week against the Packers. There's actually one play I can think of off the top of my head. Cover zero, right? And Jordan Love was in an immaculate pocket. That is not the look you want with cover zero. Cover zero, you are trying to get immediate pressure. And even when the Bears bring extra, or if it's a simulated pressure, it doesn't really matter. They're really not creating the pressure that you're looking for. So, but for this game, you may see a bump in pass rush production. And I say that, one, all the injuries I listed off, but also two, the Browns tackles have really struggled all year. Per PFF, the Browns ranked last in pass block grade with 43.9. The QB has only been kept clean on 59% of his dropbacks. Their left tackle, Cam Robinson, has allowed 5 sacks, 11 hurries, and 21 pressures. 5 of those pressures were last week. Their right tackle, JT Leviston, has only allowed 2 sacks, but has allowed 8 hurries and 17 pressures. He has graded out better as the year's gone on, but still not great. And then you also factor in, again, their starting center is going to be out. Now is Jenkins going to be playing? He's popped up, and all these other things. So if the Bears can't create a pass rush against this team, they never will. X factor for the Browns. Really stifle the run game and force the Bears passing game to take a step in its evolution. So this isn't me saying that, let's say even if the Browns do this, if they really stifle the run and make it hard for the Bears, there is a chance that the Bears passing game does take that step. This might be the week that Caleb's accuracy is more on point, that DJ Moore is more involved, not just the ridiculous, end arounds, that Luther Burden has less mental mistakes. Rome Odunze feels pain-free and healthy enough, right? That, just all these things stack. This could be the week. But if the Browns have a chance, it has to start by stopping the run. Part of that, Browns, actually, defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz said this on Bears running back Kyle Monangai. I tell you what, I have a lot of respect for this kid. He is a hard runner. Schwartz continued, Caleb, he looks like Frank Tarkenton out there sometimes. He's got eyes in the back of his head. So specifically the run game, clearly Jim Schwartz respects the run game and knows also that this is a point of emphasis. Just another note on the run game. If you look at the 2025 running backs for design rushes only, this is with a minimum of 75 carries. Kyle Monangai actually ranks 6th in terms of rushing EPA, and DeAndre Swift is not far behind with at 8. So that I would assume in the defensive room is circled on the board. Stop the run and force the Bears to beat you through the air. The question ends up becoming for the Bears is, can they do so? X factor for the Bears. I have 2. One is don't get caught looking ahead. You cannot look past this Browns team. The Browns game is the most important game currently on your schedule right now. Because if you don't get that win there, now all of a sudden, again, getting to 11 wins, which that is the number for the NFC, gets that much harder. So don't get caught looking ahead. Beat the Browns, who is still again, they are still they're a 3-win team, but they're a 3-win team that now has a different quarterback starting that played well last week. I did already say that, and they have a fantastic defense. So you cannot look past them. A little bonus one, start hot earlier. Caleb had his second worst first half of the season last week against the Packers per True Media with an EPA per dropback of negative 0.36. He completed only 42.9% of his passes for a season low of 2.3 yards per attempt. His second half, though, even with the interception, so which normally will knock you down a good bit, registered a 0.28 EPA per dropback and a passer rating of 96.1. He averaged 7.3 yards per attempt and had 10 passing first downs, the third most against the Packers this year after halftime. More of that, please. So it's there. The potential is there. Ben Johnson is fantastic at adjusting. We've seen this all year. They come out of halftime and they look like a different team. That has to happen sooner. You have to have that happen in the first and second quarter. If those stats, if that 0.28 EPA per drop back, right, that pass rating of 96.1 was spread out over the whole game, that Packers game would have been entirely different. So use this Browns game springboard, start earlier because they're going to be coming after you. All right. Last category that we're going to do today, Bear gut check. I use my gut feelings, revitalized by Capuchet, of course, to give our game predictions against the line. Browns at Bears. Bears by 7.5. The Bears are winning this, or they should win this at least. As this, I said this already. This is a must win. Now, it's not a must win in the idea of right where if you lose this, you're out of contention or something of that nature, but just with what you have left on your schedule, with a Packers game after, coming up, a 49ers game where you're playing, at the 49ers, so the weather's not going to be a factor. So you're going to have to fast track the 49ers who are better in the warm weather. They're going to have that at their disposal. And then you finish up with the Lions. All of that, like that, those are tough games. Get this under your belt, and they really should, right? At the end of the day, you should be finishing this game saying, Caleb Williams, who's a second-year quarterback, who's a number 1 overall pick the year prior, who has Ben Johnson, helping along the way, significantly outplayed Shedeur Sanders, and the Bears were able to pressure Sanders in a way where he was not able to operate the offense efficiently, that the Browns had to rely on their run game, and that because of the offensive line issues, they couldn't get their run game going because of the injuries on the offensive line. That should be the narrative after the game on Sunday. Tonight's game, Falcons at Bucks. Bucks were favored by 4.5. The Falcons are a mess. They're falling apart. Between the quarterback injury, their main receiver is out. They just haven't been able to get anything together. Their pass rush is better, but you can't even play one of your main draft picks, Pierce, who you traded up for on first down because he's just not useful against the run. And the Bucks are a team that they are still trying to make the playoffs. They get Mike Evans back. Really hope he goes off for all my fantasy league purposes. The Bucks should win this. They really should. They should win it comfortably. They should win by a score. A touchdown. So I'll take the Bucks there. Packers at Broncos. This is the second most important game of the week for the Bears. Obviously, the Browns one being the most important. If the Packers are favored by 2.5. If the Broncos can win this, that helps the Bears out a lot in terms of their quest for not the division, but also trying to get potentially even the 2 seed. Because last week after they lost, they dropped from the 1 seed to the 7 seed. So this really comes down to just for me, it's the defense of the Broncos versus the Packers offense more than anything. I think the Broncos offense is what it is. I think Bo Nix is fine. That offense is fine. It's just more about, can the Broncos really stifle the Packers? So think back to Packers Eagles, kind of what that looked like, right? The Packers offense, or sorry, Eagles offense was like meh, but the Eagles defense was able to play in a way that they kept it a very low scoring game. So that's the kind of game that you're gonna have to play here. I'll still take the Packers to win this, but obviously hoping for the Broncos to win. Lions at Rams. The Rams actually have a chance to clinch the 1 seed with a win here. And as I mentioned earlier, the Bears need the Lions to not reach 11 wins. So with the motivation, the Rams are favored by 5.5. With that motivation, right, and the home field advantage, if the Rams, I think they win this. The cover is tougher. It could be a close game. The Lions obviously coming out a rout of the Cowboys. I think the Rams win, but the Lions cover. Yeah, Rams win by 3. Titans, last game we're going to do here, Titans at 49ers. The 49ers are favored by 12.5. I only put this on here because of 2 reasons. One, the 49ers game, right, is 2 weeks away. So just something to keep an eye on and how the 49ers are playing. Is Brock Purdy able to bounce back from a little bit of some rough patches that's been going on since he came back from his injury? So just what does that team look like? The 49ers defense is not what everyone thought it would be, especially their pass rush. It's a bunch of guys who you wouldn't have expected to necessarily be playing meaningful snaps for you, but they are because of injuries. The other thing too is they sit at 9-4 and are the 6th seed, so that's a team that the Bears might be fighting for a spot. Now, I don't think the Titans is a game where you necessarily are gonna, have that happen. 12.5 is a lot of points. Man, I wouldn't bet on this if I'm being honest, but I'd probably take the Titans to cover just because 12.5 is such a crazy line. But if you're going pie in the sky, you're hoping that the games that I put out here, you're hoping that the Bears win, you're hoping that the Broncos win, you're hoping that the Rams win, and you're hoping that the Titans win. Now, which of those actually occur? Most important one, as we talked about all through the show, is the Bears winning. They still have control of their own destiny, right? There's no crazy thing where, well, if the Bears win these 2 and the Packers lose this 3, and then the Lions lose this 1 and this random other team. No, none of that matters right now. The Bears have control their own destiny. Go out there, beat a team that you absolutely should beat them comfortably, and see, hey, can we get this pass game going? Because you're going to need that pass game in the next couple of weeks. That's all that we have for tonight. Thank you for popping on, all those who are watching live. If you are listening to the podcast, thank you for doing so on your commute to work on Friday, I assume. Keep an eye out for some of the other Second City Gridiron content. So, for example, Taylor Dahl, her preview should be coming out tomorrow. Check that out, or today if you're listening to this Friday. She always does a fantastic job. And then, like I mentioned, there should be actually we'll have a special surprise guest for next week. So that should be fun. And then for the Christmas week, keep an eye out for that. I'm going to try to get some content out there just so there is a preview for that week's game. But it'll be interesting, right? I mean, because you got the Packers game is on the Saturday night. The 49ers game is a night game. So you got some interesting ones coming up here. But that's all we got. Bear down, everybody.